Hello, everyone. My name is Tony Pisanelli. I'm a career transformation coach, helping people reinvent their careers. I'll be speaking on the Prosperity Online show and giving some valuable insights in terms of how you can proactively manage your career in today's fast-changing world. Hopefully, you'll get a lot of insights, and I look forward to your feedback.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today we're going to be diving deep into the world of career reinvention with someone who knows a thing or two about turning workplace wars into wins. Now, Tony, how are you doing, my man?
I'm well, thank you, Prosper, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to your audience this evening.
Absolutely. Well, the pleasure is all mine. You are a transformation career coach, which a lot of people would want to hear from, especially these days post-pandemic when everybody has been told that their jobs are non-essential. So that's one thing that a lot of people really need to have an understanding of. What's the next step, or how do they get themselves out of that? But I'm going ahead of myself here. For those that are watching right now, our guest, Tony Pisanelli, is a two-time international best-selling author, speaker, and the mastermind behind the Career by Design system. So if you've ever felt like a career is a never-ending episode of maybe, what's that show? Survivor, minus that $1 million prize. Tony's here to help you, show you that there is a way not just to survive, but to thrive. He's actually helped countless of professionals turn burnout into brilliance and job anxiety into career security. So I want you to grab your notepads, folks, because I think by the end of this episode, you might actually just find yourself ready to design the career of your dreams. Now, Tony, I could go on and on talking about things that I'm probably not even qualified to talk about. Tell us a little bit about yourself and also your transition from corporate life to actually becoming a career specialist.
Okay, all right. So I began my career, as you've alluded to, in the corporate world. I began as an accountant on a graduate program back in the early 80s. When I began my career, Prosper, there was a underlying concept called having a job for life. Okay, so you're pretty much, as long as you were delivering some sort of solid performance for the company you worked for, you could be pretty well guaranteed that you're going to be there for the long term. Now that changed in the mid to late 90s when the telecommunication company I worked for started undergoing deregulation and competitors entered into the marketplace. And I found myself in a situation early 2000 where I just completed a major project for the company, successfully completed a major project. I was in between projects. I got called into my manager's office for our weekly catch-up in terms of my status, in terms of work status, to be thrown a bombshell. And that bombshell was, would you be interested, Tony, in taking a redundancy payout? And I'm thinking, where on earth has this come from? Here I was thinking I was the loyal corporate citizen, and out of nowhere, I'm being offered the opportunity to be ushered out the door. Now, my manager did say the company was undergoing a level of job rationalisation where they were getting rid of people. And because I was considered, my role was, or title was business analyst, and there was a lot of business analysts in the company at the time, it was considered a generalist capability set. So I was vulnerable. My manager said, Tony, I've looked at your resume and you're very bland. You've got a vanilla capability set. You do a bit of financial performance reporting, planning, budgeting, project management. You're run of the mill. there's nothing about your resume that makes you stand out. That made me a fairly easily dispensable cog, Prosper. So that was a turning point in my career where as I said, they weren't in a hurry to get me out the door. They gave me the opportunity to look elsewhere in the company. I found an opportunity working in the risk management specialist area. So I became a specialist in the field of risk management. And that became my sort of turning point where I moved from operating as an employee, thinking that all I needed to do was do my job and the rest will be taken care of. From that point on, I proactively started managing my career, which is what I tell my clients. Don't simply wait for the future to arrive. Go out there and create it, which is one slice of the entrepreneurial mindset that I'm trying to impart into my coaching clients. Entrepreneurs make the future happen. Employees wait for it to arrive. A dangerous non-strategy in today's employment market. So that was my sort of story in terms of my own career transition. And I would observe, I was always from the beginning of my career, Prosper, very curious about how different people went about managing their careers. And that's where my interest today lies, where I'm fascinated by the career journey that people undergo. Some fall victim to a predatorial employer that gets rid of them, and other people make themselves so valuable that they become very hard to be dispensed with. And they're some of the lessons I impart with my clients, the difference between the two in terms of frame of operation or strategies.
Absolutely. I quite like that. And thank you so much for reframing this. I think the people that are watching this right now, if they are, of the sort of age that I am, Tony, they probably wouldn't understand that what you can stay in a job for life and not even think about going elsewhere or things of that nature. What was life like during that time? Because people would do whatever they could only to be given a golden watch at the end of their tenure. Just explain what the career environment was like during the times where people were more than happy to stick around.
Well, the world back then moved at a very slower rate than it does today. Okay. Technology was not as advanced and progressed. When I started my employment, Prosper, my communication mechanism was a pen and paper. Okay.
Well, not wrong with that.
Oh, I know, but for example, the organisation I worked in, which was Telecom at the time, was about 90,000 plus people. Okay, every time there was a pay increase, a CPI increase, for example, Prosper, there was a floor of people of about 80 or 90 people that would update people's salaries on an index card to say, okay, your salary's gone up by 2.5%. So it would be done on an index card, if you can just imagine. Then one day, the computer came along, and all someone had to do to update someone's salary level was press a button. 90-odd people were eliminated. Okay? So the days where they could come in their thongs and T-shirts and shorts thinking it was a casual operation suddenly was taken away from them. So it was a lot more casual environment. The anxiety about losing your job wasn't there until technology came along and started replacing people's work.
Absolutely. And this is the time where people really started paying attention to maybe their careers, because back in the time, as you said, you would have a job for life. Now, During that time, did people even undergo any burnout or any job dissatisfaction? Or, I just really want to paint a picture of what it would have been like back then.
I would say burnout at the time probably had a different definition, if you like, than the brutal work schedule burnout that you see today. I, for example, very early on in my career, which was almost the trigger for me becoming curious in people's career journeys, was burnt out not so much from the workload, it was burnout because I didn't like my job.
So
And you
people would
burn out
stick.
when you're doing something you don't love.
So people would just stick just because that was the culture, even if they didn't like that job. Because I was of the assumption that people would hang in because it was something they absolutely loved to do.
I don't think back then something you love doing was a key decision point when people decided their career. It's how can I earn an income? And that was it. Um, Career counsellors was not in vogue back in the 80s and 90s when in the initial phases of my career, underwent through significant dissatisfaction, but there was no career advisors or transformation or transition people that I could speak to. I had to really resolve it of my own accord, and I realised I was doing accounting work that was repetitive, month in, month out. I just couldn't deal. I got to a point where I'd had enough. I needed to move into more broader business roles to add variety to my day. Otherwise, I was really struggling in terms of a burnout from a boredom perspective.
Mm. So, Tony, you mentioned that. I mean, obviously, you were also experiencing this sort of dissatisfaction and for lack of a better word, during that time, burnout. While you were working within that job, obviously, because it was not along the things that you would have wanted to be doing. What would you have wanted to be doing at that time?
I didn't really have an inkling of what I really wanted to do until late in the back end of my career, Prosper. Uh, Maybe a little bit slow in that regard, but um, it's only as I've become more and more immersed in different people's career that I fully understand the pillars, if you like, of what it takes to design a career that is sustainable in terms of the risks that are out in the world and sustainable from of it will hold my satisfaction and give me a sense of joy, if you like. So there's some key pillars around that. And a lot of people, unless they understand those, will chop and change jobs continually, thinking, and this is what happened around the pandemic. We had phenomenon in the world called the Great Resignation, Prosper. I'm not sure whether you were aware of it. So people were resigning from their jobs en masse. And in a lot of cases, that great resignation became the great regret. People would leave one job, step into another one that someone else had left, and they were encountering the same pain points and challenges that the previous person had had. Namely, they were underpaid for what they did. They didn't have autonomy. They may have been micromanaged. Um, all sorts of things. Or, there was toxic workplace where people didn't get along, all those elements. So, and I'm just saying, as part of my coaching work with people, there needs to be certain pillars in place to make the right choice. Otherwise, you're continually chopping and changing and never building a platform to something higher, to something more enduring.
Absolutely. I quite like that because your resume or your boss at that time mentioned to you that you were quite bland, you were quite vanilla, and you were disposable, which meant you had not built somewhat of a platform or somewhat of a way of differentiating you from just about everybody else who could fit into that role? And now you've just mentioned building a platform. Could you explain what that actually means for somebody who thinks, oh, I've gone to university, I've done everything that is needed for me to be suitably qualified for this particular role?
Okay. All right. So, in terms of this platform, in terms of a sustainable career that can thrive in today's world, one of the key starting points is it an expression of who you are, or are you simply playing a role and denying yourself? So I learnt many years ago from a gentleman who turned up to my property, Prosper, and to do some landscaping work. And before he looked at the job, what he did was he stepped off my property and started surveying the whole scene. And I said to him, his name was Dave, "What are you doing, Dave?" And he said, "Before I begin a landscaping job, I assess the character of the home to make sure what I do in the garden enhances and enriches the character rather than takes away from it." Same thing applies, Prosper, in your career. Is it an extension of your character and your personality, or are you denying it? If you are denying it, you can only tolerate that for so long. That was my frustration. I was trying to be an accountant when my true character is being a teacher.
Right. But
Okay?
it does take a lot of self-awareness, which I don't know if a lot of people are prepared to go into that, because in order for you to see that which you are also supposed to be able to see that which you're not.
Well, yes, there are a certain set of questions that you can tap into. One is what are you naturally inclined to do and that you get enjoyment from? That would be my first question. That doesn't feel like work. I remember a Australian entertainer was interviewed, and he'd been in the entertainment industry for 50 years, and the hosts of the show were congratulating him on the 50 years of being able to survive the Australian entertainment industry. And they said to him, they asked the question, "Well, why haven't you retired?" And his response was, "Because you don't understand. It's not work. It's something I love doing." So that's what I'm saying to people. What is it that you love doing, and how can we wrap a career around it so that it doesn't become this burden that you carry around with you, but it's something you truly enjoy? Hopefully, does that answer your question?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Because so many people just do something just because it's the next thing they could apply on a job seeking site or a recommendation on LinkedIn or things of that nature, only to realize they actually don't, they have no business being there. You know what I mean? So many, of those jobs. Now, what sort of scenario would it then be? Like I mentioned earlier on, that so many people were told that their jobs were non-essential, during the pandemic, which you have mentioned that it was, led to the great resignation. I mean, if you're being told that you're not needed for 2 years, don't you as a human being feel like, wow, like what's the contribution that I'm actually making to this place? And I think that's why a lot of people would have left.
Yes, you start question your relevance and your place in the world, do you not? When you are discarded from employment world, a lot of people, men in particular, there's a famous saying, and I can't remember who said it: "Men are their jobs, women are themselves." Okay. When a man loses their job, they take a massive hit. I've seen a lot of my male clients contemplate suicide, Prosper, when they lose their job. Okay, they see themselves as the main breadwinner. Their power, their status, their identity is suddenly also being taken away, not just their job. Okay. And that's the rebuild that I have to work with them to get them enthusiastic about life again, Prosper.
Fantastic. Now, Tony, you would understand that this identity being shaken and being taken away from you stems from fear of not knowing whether they're going to be able to meet their obligations, fear of not knowing that they're going to still have the same respect they had within their home, their community, or wherever they went, predicated on the kind of job that they had, or the fear of just financial instability, because so many people are mortgaged to the hills, and they don't know what they will do if they cannot show up with that new car, new boat, new jet ski, whatever it is that they put on a lease arrangement. And that's, many people would fear this financial sort of instability when considering maybe a career change, or to even tinker or mess with the water. You know what I mean? Because they say don't trouble before trouble troubles you. How do you help people overcome this fear, and what sort of advice would you give to others who are maybe in the same boat?
Well, fear has got an interesting perspective on it. Like if someone said to me, I'm desperate to hold on to my job because I fear stepping out into the bigger world and facing the unknown. And I say to people, the biggest fear is probably holding on to that, and the day will come where they kick you out. What I saw some savvy entrepreneurial types do that I worked alongside, they saw the new world. The new world was, Prosper, that you could be thrown out the door at any time. I nearly was. So the decision I made was to develop a capability set that had relevance and value beyond my employer. I could take risk management and apply it not only to other corporations, but also to the small and medium businesses. Risks never go away. So I could set up a consultancy business to protect myself if my corporate employer threw me out the door. I've leveraged my risk management skills as part of my career coaching to say, okay, these are the risks to your career. What strategy do you have in place? Other people I worked alongside, Prosper, in terms of addressing the fear and the not having enough income, had started creating side hustles. While working in corporate, they were working on Saturdays. One guy was a chauffeur driver driving brides to the church. So that he started earning an income. Okay. Just in case he lost his job, didn't sit there worrying in case the day arrived. He was doing something else to protect his income stream by building something else. Another gentleman was buying and renovating investment properties and then selling them at a gain. They were being entrepreneurially creative to establish multiple streams of income, okay, that would one day, if needed, replace their job income. Does that make sense? That's how they resolve their fear. And that's what I say to my clients.
I quite like that.
Well.
I quite like that, because you know what I mean. You're sort of safeguarding yourself in order to secure the future that you absolutely would love. And I mean that really shifts people from that corporate employee mindset to the entrepreneurial sort of mindset, and quite inspiring for other people. But with these days, with the advent of all these apps, you've got Uber, you've got Airbnb, you've got Airtasker or Fiverr, or all these other apps, or Canva, or whatever it is, that you can actually create a solid side hustle, that can actually turn into something of the future. Why do we still find people not doing that, and they'd rather sit around with mates and finish a slab or VB?
All right. To answer that question, what stops people moving forward and doing something significant in the world is brilliantly expressed by a philosopher by the name of Friedrich Nietzsche. You've probably heard of him, given you're an extensive reader. And he said, when the why is big enough, the hows will look after themselves. So if you've got a big enough why to make sure income continues to come into your household, you will get off your butt and create, if needed, multiple income streams. If you don't have a big enough why, then you'll sit around waiting for what the future delivers to you. And typically what the future delivers to you is going to be painful from my experience. So you need the big enough why. Those people, that gentleman who had the chauffeur wedding business had 4 children. He needed to put food in their mouth.
Yeah.
Okay. He understood the company he worked for was not guaranteeing full employment for the rest of his working days. He needed to get off his backside and create different income streams. Entrepreneurs create multiple income streams. Employees at the low end will rely and do everything to protect their one income stream, which I believe today is a flawed strategy.
I can only attest to that. I mean, with the advent of technology, like you said, not being able to do more, be more, and have more is actually a sign of maybe not having adequate information or the will, like you say, the why to actually get things going. Now, I pity the guy who told you your resume or you were vanilla, because you went on and really upskilled. I mean, you went on and published 2 books now. You are now a powerful storyteller, and I think you've really created a moat around the skill set and the strategies that you now have in order to show up in the world. Now, let's start maybe with one skill set, the one that you are showcasing right now, which is of storytelling. How has that actually been able to change your career, and how are you using it to actually connect with your clients and those that need your services?
Okay. And well, from what I've learned over the last 10, 15 years, well, even in my corporate day, I remember in my corporate days, Prosper, being invited to presentations. And I remember the company's chief finance officer giving a presentation, and it was dry and it was factual. He had no enthusiasm and passion about anything, and he was putting everyone to sleep. And then eventually, after I left corporate world, I knew that I needed to become a better speaker. Okay, so I attended in Melbourne a speaking event, and the most captivating speakers who held people's attention told stories. Okay, and I remember one gentleman beginning his presentation with the words, "Get out and stay out." And I'm thinking, is there a fire in the building that we need to get out of here, or what's happening? What he was actually saying was, to thrive in today's world, you need to get out of your comfort zone and stay out of it. Okay. And he shared the story of how he was an engineering student or whatever he was, and he kept thinking about the people in the poor parts of the world who didn't have enough water. And he eventually left his uni studies, and he got together with a group of friends, and they built a capability where they transported filtered clean water in plastic bottles to poor countries in the world. So he didn't move from university into a job. He moved from university to doing something for humanity. And when your job is connected to a bigger purpose beyond your own life, you get rid of burnout, you get rid of dissatisfaction, and you stop worrying about your income because you're playing a bigger game. So that would be my answer to that question in terms of capturing stories with a message. Everyone has a story, and the message is the lesson that people need to hear in terms of how can I apply this in my own career? How can I apply the concept of getting out and staying out of my comfort zone in respect to my own career journey, which is what I did when I left the vanilla person behind and became a risk management specialist.
Absolutely. I think that was the best thing that you ever did for yourself, because just moving from being, what does Zig Ziglar call it, a wandering generality into a meaningful specific, it really put you in the forefront. I remember when we were kids, we would play with the magnifying glass. You know, if you really concentrate the rays of the sun onto a piece of paper, you could actually start a fire. And you know, so it's one of those things that if you're just letting the rays be everywhere else, yes, you might cause some UV, but it doesn't have the intensity of actually igniting something meaningful. And if you then couple that with storytelling, then that's just fuel to the fire, because now you are giving that, you know, passion wings and actually giving it purpose to actually go to the people that it's meant to be. So you've now made it your goal in life to help other people expand their careers just beyond income. It's no longer about the six figure, the, you know, corner office or whatever it is. It's now, you know, no longer about the status of, yes, I'm the CEO, I'm the managing director of X, Y, and Z. What does a purposeful, satisfying career look like for those that have never come across it?
Um, it's making some sort of contribution to other people. It's moving. Well, let's look at Steve Jobs. You mentioned Steve Jobs before. Would you agree, in terms of his contribution to technology, smartphones and portable music players, in some shape or form, he moved the world forward, did he not?
Oh, absolutely. Especially I think what he did the most is that calligraphy class that he attended, which now became the fonts that are used on the Mac. And he actually jokes and says that, you know, even Windows is using that. So had he not attended that class, we probably wouldn't be having the words as we have them today.
True. When I was a teenager, Prosper, back in the 70s, when I enjoyed listening to pop music, I would have to get home, put a record on my music player, and sit in front of it to listen to the music. There was none of this portable headphones and a library of music in my pocket that I could listen to whenever I wanted. It was so that convenience that he's given people, he's moved the world forward. So that's the contribution. So what he did was change the world. Jeff Bezos is another person I look at. Amazon. How much time do you save by being able to purchase something online rather than driving to a store, finding a car park, potentially having an accident, they're going there and coming back, standing in a queue waiting to buy something? How much of his people's time has he saved by creating Amazon, an online shopping environment? And the other thing I say to people, if you look at, I study entrepreneurs, Prosper, as you do. Jeff Bezos created Amazon and he used the power of leverage. Amazon relies on the internet being there, but he didn't discover the internet, Prosper, did he? It was already there. It relies on computers being there, but he didn't discover or develop the computer. It was already there. So can you see he built on that capability, leveraged it to create Amazon? And he gives you, in a world that's poor for time, has created shopping convenience. Can you see Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs have made a contribution to humanity? Not many people each day will sit down and say, thank you, Steve, thank you, Jeff. But I recognise their contribution in my own life. Maybe it's because I've got a career hat on and I can see the difference they're making.
Absolutely. But obviously, somebody would now be feeling a little bit, maybe a little bit inadequate in comparing themselves to those sort of juggernauts. I mean, obviously, even the little contribution of enabling a banking transfer, enabling kids to cross the road or whatever it is, that in and of itself is somehow a way of moving humanity forward. And I'm supposing in your career, in the time that you've then transitioned to be a career coach, you've actually helped many professionals gain their own composure and maybe contributing their own little way to what we are now doing. Maybe you can share a success story, obviously without mentioning names, that actually particularly stands out for you, that you've actually helped somebody leverage whatever is around them so they too can be, do, and have a happier existence.
All right, so let's look at the focal point, and thank you for clarifying that. I didn't want people to think saying you need to be Jeff Bezos or Steve Jobs. We can do it in our own way at our own level. So a gentleman I was coaching owned a building business. Okay, so building residential homes. And when he got into his early 50s, his body began to say to him, I can't do this anymore. My knees are giving up. My shoulders are giving up. And also he used to lose sleep at night because when you're on your own building business, you're working to a customer schedule, Prosper, and the biggest interference was the weather. So if he would hear the wind or the rain, he'd say, oh, no, we're going to lose another day or whatever. So it proved a stressful situation for him. And the other reason he wanted to leave the building business was because you needed to guarantee the upfront price of the build, and if he incurred increases from his suppliers, he couldn't pass that on to his customers. So he would potentially have to carry that risk. So I knew him well enough to know he loved the building game. Okay. But he couldn't run his own building business. So what we identified, I said to him, his name was Alex. Well, there still is Alex. He's still with us. What part of your work do you enjoy most? Going back to what I said earlier. And he goes, to be honest, Tony, it's not actually the building stuff day by day or actually handing over the keys to the client at the end of the project. The aspect I most enjoy is mentoring the young males and apprentices that worked for him. Okay, because a lot of them, young men in their early 20s and mid-20s and whatever, that worked for him would go out on a Friday and Saturday night and spend all their money and get into mischief and all that sort of stuff. And he knew that if they continued to do that, they would end up in a difficult situation down the track. So he would mentor them to say, you need to save money, you need to stop drinking excessively, etc. So he was a father figure to them, if you like, Prosper. So from that, what he decided to do was to get qualifications as a TAFE teacher, where he would go into the building colleges and help train apprentices in terms of carpentry and becoming builders. But he would also impart his wisdom of watching young men grow up into men and how to be responsible citizens, so that, they didn't beat up on their partners and all that sort of misbehaviour that the male population can inadvertently find themselves in. So can you see, from his building business to becoming a building TAFE teacher, he's making a contribution to young men becoming mature men, acting responsibly, and not, say, taking their life, because life gets on top of them, because a significant percentage of the suicide rates tends to be in men in that 20s age bracket. So can you see how someone who came from a building industry today is making a contribution to humanity?
Oh, absolutely. And I quite like that story. You know why, Tony? Because yes, you could build a house, but if you look in my street, there's probably 100 houses on either side, and nobody remembers which builder that was. But if there's a husband, a brother, a son who has survived yet another day because your client helped them, people would see that contribution a lot more, because they've actually helped somebody and have a happier existence. And I can see why they're really, really interested in that sort of way of contribution. Now, if people want to get started on their journey, Tony, to transforming their career and seeing what it is that you can help them with, what would be the first thing that you can suggest they look at or do?
Well, as we've mentioned a few times, I have a book on Amazon called Career by Design. That's one way of becoming familiar with my work and what I'm about. So that's one option. If they want to go to my website, tonypisanelli.com, and I'm sure you'll sort of give them the details, or connect and reach out with me on LinkedIn. Again, Tony Pisanelli will find me through that social media platform.
Absolutely. And I'll definitely make sure that all those links are in the show notes below, so that people can actually get somehow, connected to you. Now, Tony, while you were speaking, I was having a bit of a think as to the kind of work that you do. Indulge me a little bit here, if you may, is akin to somewhat of a rite of passage, where in our culture, boys, when they get to like 13, 14, 15, you're proverbially called in by the village elders and you're tapped on the shoulder, and then they say it's your turn to lead now. So you now go in and pick a trade or profession that is suitable to you and who you are, and that's who you become. So you can become the village cobbler, you can become the village smith, the village whatever it is that suits you. Okay. And I'm thinking that this is what you're taking people through, because everybody just goes through university. Nobody really tells them to address their why and actually, create a platform around the work that they do. But I think after having gone through, your coaching and your leadership and guidance, they come out on the other side knowing who they're supposed to be, and they can actually contribute to the greater humanity. Would you say that is somewhat of what it is that you're also contributing to these people that undergo your career guidance or career coaching work?
Prosper, without me using those exact words, rite of passage, that is exactly what my coaching is. So you've nailed it in one hit. So, for example, my rite of passage, for example, as an employee, was I was dependent on my employer for an income, a bit like I was dependent on my parents for my early survival. That shifted from my parents to my employer. Okay? But the true rite of passage is, can you move from someone else giving you an income to you generating it for yourself working as an entrepreneur, and potentially you creating an income for others because you employ someone in your business. That becomes a self-reliant rite of passage where you move from dependency to independence.
Fantastic. And tell us, send the elevator down, Tony. You've risen to the top, written 2 books, and now you're enjoying. What's it like at the top? What should we expect?
I guess the greatest satisfaction I have, and one of the greatest freedoms that comes from what I do, is being in control of my time. Okay? Money from my investments that I've accumulated over the years and from my business gives me control of what I do each day. One of the great problems that employees have is they find themselves in a predator-prey cycle, Prosper, where their employer is their predator and they are the prey. I remember at one point in my career, it was about 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, and I'd finished my work for the day, and I've come out of my office, started walking down a narrow little passageway, making my way to the elevators. Everyone else had left for the day, except for my manager, who was the deputy CFO of the company at the time. And I heard his words bellowing out, "Where do you think you're going? I haven't finished with you yet." So that is the true predator-prey. So not only was I working for my employer, I was also working for him because he was very career-driven, and he was very keen to go from deputy CFO to CFO, and he wanted to control my time. And in that moment, in this story, this is equally important story as part of my career, I decided I am not going to be this until I retire. I'm moving on and taking control of my life. And that became an important why that I eventually got out of my own accord. I didn't want to be controlled. And I remember when I walked out of corporate employment for the last day, when I swung the doors, the sliding doors, there was a sense of freedom that came with that, because it was, in a way, a bit of a prison sentence where others had control of you.
Wow. Wow. Now, I wish a lot of people would experience that kind of freedom where, like you say, all you do is just, like you say, spend your time reading, connecting with people you absolutely want to connect with, without the pressure of having to be anywhere or be someone for other people, which is what a lot of people end up becoming. So what's next? I had a look around what you're doing. Apparently, you're sleeping a great deal. You've even become an expert in interpreting dreams. Is that how you're spending your time now there, Tony?
As part of my coaching, I get a lot of information from people's dreams, if you like, in terms of providing vital clues what's going on in their career. And I'll give you an example in my own life. When I was still in corporate, Prosper, I had a dream one night where I was walking to the train station, if you can just picture it. And as I was getting closer and closer, I saw a man tied to the train tracks, and a train was about to run over him. Okay. So the question is, what is that dream about? That person on the train tracks was me, if you like.
Wow.
And I was being run over. I was basically staying in that job was a dead end for me. That's what the dream was telling me. okay? Because the train was going to take my life, the journey of the train. And that's when I recognized I needed to move on as well. So a lot of people don't remember dreams, but for the clients who are prepared to keep a bit of a journal, I ask them to share that with me, and I use that information to provide them clues that's coming from their unconscious to help them make decisions as to whether it's now's the right time to leave or they still need to do further preparation. I'm not saying to someone, Prosper, you need to leave. I'm saying to them, let's plan this out sensibly, because we are really playing with people's lives in terms of survival, and being able to feed their families. So it needs to be well thought out. But the dream world is just information from the unconscious that's giving you some clues about whether that is your true career or whether you need to move somewhere else.
Absolutely. And half of the time, people that are in those high stress jobs hardly sleep enough to be able to dream. So there might not be much to work with there in that sort of instance. But I really appreciate the time that we've spent today, Tony. I mean, obviously, there could be a lot. You've written 2 books, you're now a storyteller, but I think we're now running out of tape. For us to be able to capture all the essence, of what you're working on. What's next? What can people anticipate in the future with you, and what can we be excited about?
Well, I've been asked by a few people to write another book, and it's a bit that we touched on earlier about that entrepreneurial journey aspect, to focus on that, because I am genuinely fascinated by entrepreneurs and in terms of how they go about what they do in the world. So that could be a potential another book that is waiting to be written, if you like, Prosper.
Absolutely. Well, Tony, you've actually committed the ultimate sin there.
Tell me.
You see, you do not mention that you're writing a book or there is a future book coming without pledging that you will come back and talk about it on the Online Prosperity Show.
All right. Oh, well, I'll come back. I will come back, Prosper, because I know it's a subject that's dear to your heart as well.
Fantastic. If you are going to be looking for people to co-author that book, I am more than happy to be a part of that process as well. But I can't thank you enough for the time that you have spent with us today. I mean, you're sharing your insights, your journey, because predominantly your life story and your experience has so much value for a lot of people that might not notice or see that there is light at the end of the tunnel, or they might actually be proverbially tied onto that railway line and not realizing that, hey, Houdini can escape that. And there could be a Houdini in reading a book or learning or actually engaging people that have walked that path. So I really appreciate you just taking us on that little journey and giving us that much of a visual into the life of Tony right there.
Thank you, Prosper, and it's been delightful speaking with you, and hopefully we've enlightened your audience.
I do hope so, because as they say, those that have ears to hear would have heard, and those that have eyes have probably seen the light. If you found value in this conversation, don't just let it end here and maybe scroll past or go to the next video. I want you to actually rewatch this episode, because there's so much that was said, and it all happened in a short amount of time. So the next time you're watching this, take notes and really start applying these strategies to your own career, because you, as Tony says, you're the one that's in charge. You're the one that's responsible. It's not anybody else's duty or job to make sure that you're well looked after. And if you're not creating a platform like what Tony has said, you just be relegated to the corner like anybody else who is blunt and vanilla and not going to the next step with the business. And of course, while you're at it, if you found that this is actually a valuable video, share it with somebody who's going through a career up and downs. It might actually help them establish whether they should stay or they should reach out to Tony and maybe get the best career advice, or just buy one of his books. Remember, your career is what you make of it, so why not make it amazing? Until next time, keep thriving. Bye for now.